If you didn't see the facts about sand impaction yesterday, please check that out. The link is in the description below, or you can click the box in this video. Now onto the symptoms of impaction. There are two types of impaction, acute and chronic. Acute is where the gecko swallows a large amount of food or substrate, which results in a blockage in the stomach and intestinal tract. Signs that your gecko has this kind of impaction are fatigue, a bloated stomach that feels quite hard, lack of appetite, lack of bowel movement. If the substrate is the cause, you'll find sand in the fecal matter. In some cases, a gecko will start straining as they try to force the blockage out, and sometimes you'll be able to see a dark mass in the stomach. A healthy gecko should have quite a clear abdomen. This is the only good image I can find, so ignore the fact she has eggs, but most geckos will have a nice, bright, white stomach. For example, with my females, I can see when they're ovulating. Chronic impaction is where the sand wears down the lining of the digestive and intestinal tract, and over time, even years, it slowly builds up the blockage. Symptoms are very similar to those of an acute impaction, but unfortunately in most cases it is too late to save the gecko. So even when people claim that they've had their geckos on sand for years, damage is almost certainly still happening even if it's not apparent yet. Now for treatment. If caught early, sand can be removed from the stomach of the gecko, and sometimes you can do this without having to visit a vet, but I'll let Lewis explain that in more detail in just a little bit. Other treatments for acute impaction usually do involve visiting a vet. Ideally a reptile vet, because speaking to people who have studied veterinary nursing and studying at a certain level myself, I know that animals such as cats and dogs take up a lot of the study. Reptiles and other exotic pets aren't focused on as much, unless you decided to specialise in them. Hence why I always recommend a reptile vet. When visiting the vet, they will usually do a physical examination and possibly take an x-ray of your gecko so you can see the blockage. Sometimes they will give you some form of laxatives to give to your gecko. If they do this, you will have to make sure your gecko is getting enough fluids, and it will probably benefit from having some round-the-clock monitoring. Sometimes if the blockage is too severe, they may need to operate. Now over to Lewis, who will tell you his story of sand impaction and how he helped his gecko out.
When it comes to buying any type of pet from a pet shop, they will always push you to buy certain things that you do not need. They're a business, and this is their biggest interest to get as much money out of you as they can, even if it involves lying and making your animal sick, and even to possible death. This is what I have experienced firsthand with my little gecko called Lilith. And down to the title of the video, you probably know what happened to her, but first, I will give a backstory to this dilemma. It was around the end of November in 2014, when me and my mother set out to buy the correct equipment for my leopard gecko as a Christmas present. I had been wanting a leopard gecko for about almost 3 years, and I wasn't going to let anything change my mind about the matter. Prior to this, I had done a lot of research on how to care for and maintain a healthy leopard gecko, so I knew roughly what I needed to use and how to use it. The lady we were issued with to help us was probably the most friendly and helpful shop assistant I had ever met. She has had experience with reptiles herself, as she owns many creatures and leopard geckos, so any information I was told, I would believe because it was from first-hand experience. When it came down to the substrate, we were told that we should use calcium sand because it's apparently like sand, but it does not cause impaction. I had even brought this up when we were discussing about this, but she was 100% sure that it would never cause impaction. This could have been down to that her Leos are very, very lucky and they've never become impacted through this, or that she was told to sell it to us, but I highly doubt that. Now, what is wrong with this is that no matter what the sand is, it will always cause impaction. Even if it says it doesn't, it will. Now you can argue all you want against me, but if you have experienced it firsthand like me, I will refuse to believe you. So, as you probably guessed, my past self gave in to the sand and bought it. Now, we will go a few weeks down the line when we first get my gecko. At first, for the first few days of having my Leo, everything seemed fine. She was eating, drinking, and pooping just fine. She seemed fairly active, but not very brave and outgoing, but this was down to her being new to me and new to her environment. But, after a few weeks, I'd begun to notice that when I showed her cricket she eats, she stopped getting excited, and she had no appetite when I fed her. I also began to realise that when I looked in her pooping area, there wasn't any feces. A few days had passed, and this still happened. I decided to talk to my mother about the issue, and from a very simple perspective, it would make sense that Lilith wasn't pooping because maybe she was growing or that she was taking in everything she was consuming. But this didn't explain why she wasn't eating and why she wasn't very active. Then, one evening, I had gone to see what she was up to, and she wasn't out at the same time she normally would be. I decided to lift up her warm hide where she was resting on it so her underbelly was visible, and it was not a nice pale white. It was green and black. I knew that this wasn't good, and of course, she was impacted. Now, of course, she's still alive today, but it did take a lot of strength and patience from both of us to cure it. And if you own a leopard gecko now and it is impacted, or you think it may be, then please do what I did. Shortly after this, I decided to give her a warm bath for 20 to 30 minutes. This was just inside a large plastic bowl. After this time, I put her back in her vivarium and let her relax. I did not feed her. I did this so it wouldn't interfere or make any matters worse. Now, if you have done this correctly, in the morning you should see a very, very large poop, depending on how long it had been in there. If it doesn't work, then make sure you keep trying until it happens. If this doesn't happen after 3 to 4 tries, then I would seriously contact your nearest reptile vet. Anyway, a few days after this, I had done some more research on sand. I was infuriated with it, because it had nearly killed my little friend. So, I decided to take it all out and replace it with paper towel or newspaper. I would seriously recommend doing this if you have sand in your vivarium right now. It will eventually kill your leopard gecko. And if you love it, then you should do what is best for it. I don't mean to come across as aggressive, but it is just a simple fact and it needs to be done. Now, a few weeks down the line, and I do think Lilith is happy, active and chirpy, but before this, I still did give her a bath to help with the excess sand from about 3 weeks ago. The sand will linger, so always check your leopard gecko. To aid it even further, I recommend putting a few drops of olive oil on a brush of some description onto the top of their mouths, so they'll lick it off and it'll act as a lubricant. I would like to thank Rebecca for allowing me to share my story with fellow reptile enthusiasts. I wish the best of luck for your potential or current leopard gecko. I'm sorry if I offended anyone by stating my facts and views, but I really don't want what happens to Lilith and even myself onto you and your little friend. Thank you.
So as you may be able to tell, sand impaction is a horrendous but easily preventable illness in leopard geckos. It can cost you a fortune at the vets and it can cost your gecko its life. So next time the shop assistant says to you, leopard geckos need to be on sand, please ignore this advice. Thank you very much for watching. This has been Leopard Gecko Talk on Sand Impaction.